Alright guys, here's a really interesting case study in tactics. Game I literally just played against a guy from the Ukraine, both rated between 1300 and 1400, and I've got the white pieces and I start with e4. We have e5 and c3, the Vienna game, my particular favourite at the moment, and we have this kind of mirrored approach. So then we bring the bishop out to c4. Now the quiet b6, I don't know if he's wanting to stop my knight or my bishop from getting to the, a6 from getting to the b5 square. So I now bring out my other knight, and we have bishop out looking at f2 and white castles. So far, all very standard. Now we have again h6, preventing the knight from going in, and I push d3, just adding another defender to this pawn and also freeing up this dark square bishop as well. Knight now to f6, and I bring out my bishop to e3. This is something I quite like to do with this, because black's dark square bishop is actually looking down at my king, and that could be a potential threat at some point in the future, and we don't want that. So I figure that if bishop takes and then I recapture with the f-pawn, it does a couple of things. It gives my rook a semi-open file, and it gives me an extra centre pawn. So black accepts the trade and I recapture with the f-pawn. So now, for example, I could think about pushing d4 at some point, and if takes, takes, and then I've suddenly got two central pawns, yeah, for this one of black's. So now d6 and d4. So I'm striking in the centre. I'd like to push d5 and harass this guy, gain space. The knight now comes to g4. So clearly he's attacking this pawn here, and if he does that, he'll have a three-way fork on queen, rook, and bishop. So I have a bit of a think about this. We can't allow the knight to capture on here. So the obvious move is to get my queen off the back rank, which also then connects my rooks and defends the pawn. Now the other knight comes in having half a poke at c2, but I'm not too concerned about that. But I drop my bishop back anyway. So now the bishop's defended twice, and it's still on its nice diagonal looking at the f7 square, which is a really key square. Now we have queen to e7, and now I kick the knight with a3, knight goes back up to c6. Obvious move here would be to push d5 and kick the knight. First I kick the other knight, which actually has nowhere to go other than all the way back here to where it came from on f6. So I feel like now I've got a lead in development, right? I've completed development. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces out in the board, and I've castled. Okay, so that's worth 6 against 1, 2, 3, 4 black, who hasn't castled. So now d5, keeping the pressure on, harassing this knight. I know this knight is almost certainly going to come to a5, because the only alternatives are to go right back into his corner, which he doesn't want to do. But I anticipated that, and I just thought I'd drop my bishop back to a2. I don't want to lose my bishop at this point in time. You don't want to do that when you've got a development advantage anyway, really. So now bishop d7, and yes, one thing I spotted, which my opponent did not spot, is that the knight is effectively trapped where it is now. Can't go there. I've got pieces covering everything, and he can't go back to b7. So now, b4. So what he should have played is probably something like b6 and given himself an escape. So I play b4 and the knight is lost. So now I've won a knight for a pawn. Pretty basic tactics. The question is, I guess, do you look for trapped pieces? When a piece moves somewhere, just have a scan, right? Just have a scan. So after the knight moves here, I literally went, okay, well, if I move my bishop back, then he can't go there, and he can't go there, and he can't go there, and he can't go there. That's all you have to do. It's just like, how, of all the possible squares this knight can move to, which ones are covered or unavailable, and I realised it was trapped. Black did not realise that, and so he lost his piece. Okay, so now bishop to d5. So I'm proposing a trade of bishops. I'm up a piece already, so trades are going to be in my interest. Black wasn't keen on this and instead went for this. Now this is a really key point. So, what is Black thinking here? Okay, Black's thinking, if I capture this pawn, right, then I'm removing this. The bishop here is defended by the pawn and by this knight. Okay, now if I capture the pawn, knight captures, then I can grab the bishop. So I've won a pawn. However, can you see the problem with the thinking there? The problem with the thinking is assuming that your opponent has to capture with the first piece that you thought they would capture with. And here I realise I don't, because I can capture with the bishop. Capture backwards with the bishop, and I've just won a knight for a pawn again. And if bishop wants to trade, then we still have that defended by the knight. So now I'm up 2 pieces for 2 pawns. So queen moves across to d7, and I move my queen out here, so maybe building up some pressure now against f7. I'm thinking maybe my knight could move out of the way, attack the queen. Lots of ideas now. Now we have a kind of a skewer on the queen, but I can just capture with the knight, so that's okay. And Black's doubled his pawns. It's nice. I just dropped my queen back here because I've what was I thinking at this point? For some reason I still wanted to keep my attention on that pawn, I think. Also attacking here maybe. So I've got ideas of maybe knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes with check. Also hitting the king and that pawn on g7. And we have c6. Oh yeah, so this pawn is currently hanging, so c6 prevents that, and now rook to d1. So my idea now is queen takes e5 with check. The only defender of that pawn that could capture my queen is this pawn here. Okay, and if that happens, rook takes queen. However, depends what the king does as well. Because if the king moves here, hang on. So if queen takes, pawn takes, rook takes, that doesn't really work, because then king takes, rook. So that was slightly ill-conceived. I can, however, capture with the knight as well. So anyway, Black seems to spot this and pushes f6. Now I drop my bishop in to force the king to move. King's now off the mark, and now I come in with this. And this was actually a mistake then on my part, because Black can now fairly happily capture, say, with that pawn. No, we can't. He captures with the pawn. Then I take the queen. King takes. I'm still up in material, so it's actually okay. Now queen to e6, and I retreat my knight to f3 where it's defended. We have a pawn push, another pawn push, and now pawn takes, and can you see the threat here for Black? What does Black miss? Simply recaptures the pawn. Now rook e1, and the queen's going to fall. There's nothing that can block the attack on the queen, and my opponent there resigns. So all relatively simple tactics really, guys. It's just spotting when a piece is in a trapped position, and some miscalculations on my opponent's part. I think really the couple of key moments. So I think this one here, he just didn't quite calculate it through. Okay, so we know what he's thinking. He's thinking, okay, I can take up both defenders of this annoying bishop. So takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and he's won a pawn back. So he's now only 1 pawn down. But of course that isn't the way that it happened in the end. So yeah, hope that's been useful. Little quick exercise in some tactics. They say chess is 99% tactics, and I am inclined to agree, certainly at this level. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Chess Bootcamp if you haven't subscribed, and I'll see you soon.